your hand if you can hear and see, okay? Okay. If you can't hear, try and figure out how to do this. And if you have your hand up, you can also put your hand down. So if you click on the hands down button again, then your hand will go down. Very good. Okay. Sure, just click on the button again. Okay. So we're talking about A-level psychology today. And this is a bit strange because if you were in my class, I would know you quite well, and we would be discussing a lot of things more easily. But let's see. Let me just see. Okay, so my first question to you is, why are you interested in psychology? People are quite interested in psychology, and I would like it if you could just type for me in the text box on the side, why are you interested in psychology? Konstantina, I can see you raising your hand. Very good. Okay. To explore myself, says Hazib. Very good. It's true. Psychology gives us a chance to understand ourselves very well and other people. 2 or 3 more responses. This is a clue to people's behavior, to understand people better. 2 or 3 more ideas. A student once told me, so I could read people's minds. And although that's not completely possible, it is true that we have more clues about people's behavior if we have psychology knowledge. All right, so. In any subject, it's really important that we understand what the questions is that subject is trying to answer. We study all these careers and all these directions and all these fields of study because we want to find answers for something. And the thing is that psychology answers questions about humans. And the topic for today is, how do psychology answer questions about humans? So have a look. I need you to get ready in the following manner. Please have a pen and paper ready for you, or a place to make notes, because I don't want you to waste your time. So come away from the session with some information and some new language. Every lesson have new vocabulary. And to become a psychologist or any kind of specialist in a field means that you have the language that goes with that subject. So your quest or your challenge is to see how many new words you actually pick up from psychology in this time that we have together. Mute your microphone, please. And then when we have questions, I really encourage you to actually type your answers in the chat box. There are no wrong answers. They're all useful ways to engage with one another. This is an interactive session, so I really need you to type when I ask, or when we think together. Give me some ideas that you have. Okay, so the first thing is, remember I said every subject tries to answer questions about humans. And here's some icons that explains a few subjects. And what I'd like you to do is to see, what do you think the subject is, and what questions about humans does it try to answer? I'll give you a minute or so to think. Okay, let me see. All right, let me see. We have history, and the question it tries to answer is, how did people develop over many, many years? Economics, what answers the question, what are people's relationship with money in society and resources? Business, how do people create wealth? Criminology, how do we deal with people in society that does not follow the laws and the rules that we give them? This is a scary picture for geography, but geography is about humans' relationship with in the environment. Sociology, if we have a lot of people together, what are their characteristics in interacting in groups? And finally, politics, how do people live together and work together as big groups of big political groups in between countries? Okay. Sorry, the PowerPoint. Okay. So my question to you is, what do you think psychologists do? If that is what sociologists, historical scholars, and all these people do, what do you think psychologists do? I'm sorry, the toggling between the screens a bit hard. Any ideas? What do psychologists do? I'm looking at my chat box. Any ideas? What do you think psychologists do? Paulina, I like that you said, I am a psychologist for my friends. It's very true. A lot of what psychologists do is actually listening to other people. Okay, so here's some humorous ideas about what psychologists do. Listen to other people. Try to make sense of people's unconscious that people do not understand about themselves, like their dreams and their wishes that they don't know about. And psychology changes over time. So in our current situation, people are much more in relationship with their phones than they are with humans. So that's the last joke. Send me the emoji that best describes your feeling today. So we come to the definition of psychology, and it reads as the scientific study of human behavior and cognition. So cognition is really a fancy psychological way to say how humans think, what they do, and how they think. And there are several fields within psychology that helps us understand how humans think and how they behave. But if you're looking for a definition, that is the definition for psychology. And this whole idea of scientific study makes it more than just common sense. One of the biggest problems that we have as humans when studying psychology is we think, well, I've been a human for several years now. I have friends, I know my family, I know my friends, I know myself. So what can psychology teach me that's actually different from what I know anyway? And that's why the idea of scientific study come in. We try in psychology to answer what questions we have about people and how people work. But when we answer these questions, when we go about answering these questions, we have to do it very carefully. And what we're looking for is really empirical evidence. There's a word that you can write down, empirical evidence. So for this example, if you had somebody who said, I love you, that is a feeling they have, it's a thought they have inside their heads, you can't really know what's inside of them. So what you need to know is this really true? And how would you know if somebody actually loved you? Can I have some ideas? If somebody said, I love you, how would you know that? Oh, this is where you type some answers in the text box on the side. I'm sorry, I think there's a bit of lag. I think your answers, okay, by his expressions. Thank you, Azib. Her eyes will say it. I like that. All right. Some more ideas. If somebody said, I love you, how will I know this? Tone of voice. Yes, I can listen to how they talk. My feelings say it. Okay, so there's some reciprocity. There's some feelings inside me that actually resonates with that person. Body language. Very good. Okay, so when it comes to actually knowing if somebody loves you, is, as your answer suggested, there is things that you can have to be able to see and things that that person does. So texting me, writing me poems, giving you little gifts, being really attentive, being there when you need them, talking a lot, just knowing what you like and caring about you. These are all physical evidence that you can see and you can test. You can really know whether that in that thought that the person has that they love you, that you can actually see and hear and feel it. And that's what we talk about empirical evidence. When we answer questions in psychology about human behavior and cognition, we don't just think about what we think humans do, but we have to go and find some evidence, empirical evidence, testable evidence for what we believe about humans. And we do it very systematically. So we use a thing called the scientific process. And if you have studied any of the sciences, probably physics or chemistry or biology, or those kinds of sciences, you'll see that the scientific process is used in those subjects as well. And it usually follows these steps, that you ask a question or you observe something in the world or about humans in this case. You do some background research, because we always stand on the shoulders of giants. That means that there are always people who has looked at human behavior before us and have found evidence for the things that we are looking into. Then we construct a hypothesis. We make a statement to say, this is what we think is probably going on here. And then we can test it through different methods. So experiments is one way to test it. But in psychology, there are quite a number of methods. And if you study A-level psychology, you will actually learn quite a few of the methods, which is basically how can I get some data or evidence for my question. Once I've done my method, I collect all the data, all the information, and then I have to process this data. I have to do some statistics on it, compare this data with my hypothesis, and then I draw a conclusion. Was my hypothesis valid? Is it really a question that can be answered? Then I can report the results. And then it goes into the big pool of psychological evidence. If the hypothesis if my results tell me that my hypothesis wasn't really what I thought it was, then I go back into this cycle and I start again. I change my question slightly and I construct a new improved hypothesis. And so I go through this whole process over and over again. And this is how the field of psychology grows. Many people ask questions about humans, and consequently they go through the cycle to find more and more information all the time. So research process in psychology has a number of things that you need to do. And if you do A-level psychology, you will have about 4 or 5 practical research projects that you will do. And all my students will tell you that is the most fun that you can have. They love doing their own research. little research projects. And basically in a little research project, you will go through all these steps, just like a psychological researcher does, and you will learn how to do each one of these. So what we want to conclude is these things that we do is called studies, all right? So it's not study like study for an exam or study to do something. A study is a small research project or a big research project. It differs in how small or big. And these research projects or studies provide empirical evidence, all right? So what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is I'm going to talk you through 3 studies to see how we find this empirical evidence in a systematic way. So the first research question we have that we often wonder or just observe is, are beautiful people happier than others? So in our comment box, what do you quickly think? Do I have yes, no, maybe? Can you give me some feedback? Are beautiful? No. Okay. UG says definitely no quickly. Anyone no? Ilya thinks no. No, says Amir. Maybe. Xinyan. No. Okay. So, nah. Okay. Very good. So we have common sense knowledge, right? We have things that we think, yeah, no, that is a silly question. I don't think beautiful people are happier than other people. Then we go to empirical evidence. So somebody designed a study to actually look to see whether this is true. So the study's name is Beauty in Mind, the effects of physical attractiveness on psychological well-being and distress. So look carefully. This is about physical attractiveness. This is not about being a beautiful person inside or being a beautiful personality or being a kind, nice person. This is about looking at your face and your body and seeing whether if you're physically attractive, you do better psychologically and what's the effect on distress. And this was done by Gupta, Etkov, and Mads, all right? So these are the authors. And in psychology, it's really important that we know who did the study and when this was done, because psychological information changes all the time. So this is a 2016 study, and it's 4 years old, so it's slightly new still. So have a read and see what they actually did and what they found. I'll give you some time to do this, 3 minutes or so. Okay, so what's going on here? This study was done to see if attractive people, or this is the background information, there is an idea that attractive people enjoy many social and economic advantages. So if you are slim and beautiful, the common sense idea is that you have social and economic advantage. And many of the studies that they've done before was a cross-sectional design, which means they take a number of people from different ages and actually just see what their what they're thinking at that moment in time. So maybe in 2014, you choose really old people, middle-aged people, young people, and children, and do one little study with them, get information from them once. But this study was a longitudinal survey, which means over many years, they took the same people and they used males and females from Wisconsin in the US and followed them from their late teens, like 18 years, 18, 17, 18, 19, 20, until their mid 1960s, when they were in their 60s, And so how did they do this? And this is our method. They did interviews with siblings and they asked the people themselves. And what they asked about them is about their physical appearance, how their physical appearance influences their psychological well-being or ill-being. So does what they look like have an influence on what they're feeling and their mental health? So then the findings, was that there's a significant positive relationship between measures of physical attractiveness. Okay, so how it works is the more beautiful these people were at high school, it seems like in middle age they were more satisfied with their bodies and their height and their level of psychological well-being. And there was a negative relationship between the measure of physical attractiveness and depression. All right. So the more beautiful you were, the less depressed you were in older age. So here's the results. It suggests that attractiveness do impact psychological well-being and depression directly, as well as through its effects on other life outcomes. So in this study, and this is one little study, they actually found that more physical attractiveness has a good influence on people's well-being. But now I have to warn you, this was done in Wisconsin, America, with a small group of people. That does not tell me about everybody in the world. That tells me about this small group of people. That was their conclusion. All right. So every study is like a Lego block. It's like a little piece of information that I have about a really small bit, just a few people. And I keep building more and more blocks until I have enough information to say, this is true for everybody. This small study cannot be generalized to the whole population, all the people in the world. It's just in the people in this study. Okay, so let's look at the next one. So here's a question that you think, if you're a new parent, or your brother or sister, or with somebody who has a baby in the house, you should actually know this, right? How much should young children sleep? This is like, hello, common sense. You are a parent, you have children, you should know this. But then what they did is then they tried to find the empirical evidence for this. So there was a study, the sleep patterns of normal children. So when we talk about normal children, we're talking about children who doesn't have health problems, children who doesn't have disabilities. There's no specific thing. They're just healthy, normal children. And this study was done by Armstrong, Quinn, and Dads. And look, this is quite an old study. It was 1994, all right? So what did they find? I'm going to walk you through this so that you see the format or the shape of every psychological study. When I do a psychological study, I find the answer, but I'm looking for it in a very systematic way. So I always have objectives. What am I trying to find out? So this one was to determine a range of sleep behavior in normal children to the age of 38 months. All right, so it's like there's not only one sleeping behavior, but there's different sleeping behaviors. That's the idea of the range of sleep behavior. And to see if parents who have problems with their children's sleep behavior, what the problems are. That's what they tried to find out. The method is, how did they go about it? How did they try to find this answer? Again, they did a cross-sectional survey. So they asked people questions by a questionnaire about their children and how healthy their children are. And this is quite a big study because, look, they used 3,383 questionnaires and 96.5 people returned their questionnaire. So they got a survey in the post, or they actually replied, and a lot of people replied. So this is a good study that tells me about more people and is therefore more valid maybe than the Wisconsin study that might have had only a few people in the study. So then you get your data. Oh, and we love data because as soon as we have data, we can do something with it. So the data they had was how often people sleep, and for young children sleep frequency, and for how long. How did they fall asleep? How long did they how long did they take to actually just settle down and calm themselves down before they start sleeping? And the age when the child first slept through the night, and how many times they woke up in the night. And they also collected ideas about what the parents' problems were with their child's sleeping behavior. So very common sense things, but now we are looking at it empirically. We're getting data, and we are going to get results from this data. They found, surprisingly, there is a wide range of normal childhood sleep behavior. So there's not a one size fits all for all babies. Okay, so circadian rhythms or your sleep cycle is not well established until 4 months of age. So babies younger than 4 months have different sleep patterns, and it's not routine yet. All right, frequent nighttime awakening is common from 4 to 12 months. Nighttime setting requires more parental input from 18 months. So when the baby is 18 months old, then the parent needs to go and settle them more often, because now the little child doesn't want to sleep as easily as the baby wanted to. But a large proportion of parents have a problem with their child's sleeping behavior. And this is interesting because the conclusion says that if parents do not know what the children's sleeping behavior is supposed to look like and know that it's normal, then it has all these implications that they think there's the baby is ill, or they give them medication, or it can actually lead to the parental depression and child abuse, because they think their children are not normal. They don't have normal sleeping patterns, when in fact the study shows that there's many different ways that children's sleeping behavior differ. And that was a very useful study to actually help people with small children. If I know this information from my data, I am now able to give parents some advice, and to make new parents feel better, to say, don't worry, be calm. Normal children have very different sleeping behaviors. All right, so now over to you in the last few minutes. Why do girls like to shop? I'm sure if you're a girl, and I don't want to stereotype anybody, but you know girls, and maybe if you're a girl, you know that shopping is a lovely thing to do. And this study looked at shopping with my mother, reminiscence of adult daughters. All right, and that was done by Minahan and Huddleston in 2012. So this is an 8-year-old study, so we still think, this is good information. Okay, so take a few minutes. You don't have to know all the words, just get the gist for me. So just sort of read through this, scan through it quickly, and see some ideas in here, what the study was about. So often in reading at A levels, there's different kinds of reading, and sometimes reading is just scanning, looking for the most important information before we read it really carefully. So in the interest of time, because we don't have that much time together, let's walk this through. Okay, so if we analyze this study, we know some background information. If you remember the scientific process, I always go, what do we know about this question already? So here is the question, the research question is, the study investigates the transfer of perception and skills of shopping from mother to daughter and daughter to mother, as seen by adult daughters. So the people that they asked this about was already grown-up daughters, and they were looking at how did the shopping experience and people's feelings and skills in shopping actually transfer between mother and daughter. And they asked daughters aged 21 to 70 about the shopping experience with their mothers. So that was my delicious research question. And the population are the people who were studied. So this was daughters, they had to be daughters, and they were aged 21 to 70. So the objectives was threefold. There was three things that they wanted to get in from the study. And often, if you have funding to do a study, you can find more than one, you can have more than one objective. So what did they want to find out exactly? To understand how daughters perceive the shopping with their mothers, how daughters value the shopping experience, and to analyze about consumer habits, preference, and experience between generations. So here you can see psychology also is applicable to business and management of people. And that is what they wanted to find exactly, is the objective. How did they find the information? Is the method. And the method in this case was actually interviews. They physically asked people to talk about these experiences. Analyzing the results or the findings. So there's three findings that came out of this study. Can you spot them? It's more about the relationship than about the shopping. Nobody spoke negatively about their shopping experience. So even if the mothers and daughters maybe didn't get along, when they went shopping, they were feeling very positive about it. And also that a mother's influence remained in a daughter's life even after she has died. So for a long time, your mom will still have an influence on your life. Okay. So those were three studies that we had a look at. And what I'd like from you is, from what we've talked about so far, what have you learned? This was very fast, but have you now come away with some ideas about psychology or shopping or studies or the scientific process? I see you've already wondered, why do girls take more time to shop? Yes, that's an excellent question. So a good way to find it would be to interview girls and actually ask a lot of girls why they do. Okay. Any things that you've learned in this short little period of time? Women love shopping anyway, even if they are upset or happy. Thank you, Amir. I think that's so true. And it's not something that we just know. In this case, the study actually had some evidence, some empirical evidence to answer that question, yes. And it might be it's because it's something that they do with their moms. Okay, so my final thought is this. In any lesson that you have in psychology, especially if you're an international student, it's important that you remember two things. To do well in A-level psychology or any A-level subject, if English is not your first language, you must actively collect language, because you cannot be a psychologist without having the language of a psychologist. And many times, the words in one subject means different things from another subject, right? So a study we saw here is actually something completely different in psychology. Come to every lesson and get some treasure from it. And so my advice to you is that from every lesson that you have, walk away with not only new ideas, but with new language. So if you were in my class for real, we'd have more of a discussion about this, and it would have been a lovely, fun debate between all of us. But at the end of the lesson, I would expect you to have come away with the ideas of the scientific process, empirical evidence, how studies work and the structure of studies, what the hypothesis is, and be able to use this language in your discussion of studies and in your conversation with your classmates. Okay, so that is everything I had to say. I wonder, Shahina, if people have questions, and if there's time for a few questions that I might be able to answer if you wanted to. Over to you then.
Yeah, exactly. So if anybody has, well, also thank you very much, Susanna. I found that really interesting. So thank you very much.
The shopping part of the baby.
Exactly, the shopping part. Yes. If anybody has any questions now for Susanna, please do just type into the box. We'll give you just a couple of minutes to type those questions. If not, you can always contact Susanna directly or through our email address, which is international@mpw.ac.uk. But we'll just give you a couple of minutes now to think of any questions you might have, and then we'll go from there.
And this can be about psychology in general. It doesn't have to be just the things that we talked about in the lesson. Or maybe A-level psychology, something that you're wondering about studying A-level psychology. I see, very good. Why the behavior of a teenager change when he starts his teenage years? Yes, excellent question. And if you're interested in that for real, you want to look into a field of study called developmental psychology. And it's a stream in psychology itself that actually explains with biological hormones, growth spurts, all those things, emotional changes, brain changes, neuroscientific changes. So if you can go online, go look at developmental psychology and adolescent changes, and you will actually find quite a number of psychological information about that change. But that's a good question. And Felicity, it seems it's all the questions for today.
All the questions for today, but it was a very good question. So, but thank you so much, Susanna. Really, really appreciate your time today, and thank you everybody for joining. I hope you found it interesting and informative. And yeah, so we'll sign off. Susanna, is there anything you'd like to say as a closing statement, or?
Yes, I think I have to say this psychology is one of the most fascinating subjects there are. And I think really if you enroll in a class, that is so lovely because you get to know your classmates and you get to know the teacher, and we really talk about things about how humans work. That does not only help you in your life now, but actually even if you don't study psychology in the future, there's like a whole number of careers where psychology is incredibly useful for. Basically any career that has humans in can actually benefit from psychology. Okay, thanks for coming.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, everybody, and stay safe. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.